Okay, welcome back to the Adventure Within channel. My name is Andrew Fritz. I'm a clairvoyant, healer, and meditation teacher. And today we have an interview with Julian Bermudez. Julian is a therapist, guide, and companion on the path of healing. He works closely with people navigating trauma, identity, and the integration of psychedelic experiences, helping them reconnect with the deep, unshakable truth of who they are. His mission is simple: to preserve and nurture the human experience. In a world that often pulls us away from our aliveness, Julian helps clients come back to themselves, to each other, and to the world around them. His work isn't just about feeling better, it's about recovering what it means to be human. Hi, Julian. Welcome to the show.
Andrew, thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you. Um, so I'm very new to what you do. So the first thing I'd like you to kind of discuss is your work blend. Did a little bit of research, and you kind of mentioned like self-inquiry, somatic therapy, meditation, and kind of psychedelic integration. I wonder if you could just kind of briefly touch on each of those. Maybe what style of meditation. I'm not really very familiar with somatic therapy, so that's just going into that would be really helpful as well.
Sure, sure. So each one of those we could spend quite a bit of time talking about.
Got it.
So let me just give you the nutshell here and then we can dive in wherever you'd like to go.
Sure, sure.
When I work with people, the first thing that I'm trying to identify are patterns that are in their life that might be constricting them or harming them in some way.
Mm,
These patterns, almost everybody can identify some amount of pattern in their life that's harming them.
sure.
These patterns almost always, at some point in their life, provided some sort of relief, some sort of aid, some sort of help.
Mm,
In some cases, they might have even saved their lives at some point.
mm,
So these patterns that I'm looking at are what I would call an adaptation. And the adaptation the thing that they're adapting to is usually trauma. I
mm,
would define trauma as bad things that happen that shouldn't happen.
mhm,
So when we're kids, if our parents are abusive, physically, emotionally, mentally, sexually, whatever,
mhm,
if our parents are negligent, they're not present, or they have an illness, or they become incarcerated, or they abandon us, or they, whatever it is that happened in their lives where there's a disconnect or they're not present,
sure.
bad things happening that shouldn't happen. But it could also be good things that are supposed to happen that don't happen.
Mm,
So if we might have very loving parents that care tremendously for us, but they're very stressed with work and finances, that stress travels through them to us as children, and we adapt to it in whatever ways are possible.
mm,
This adaptation is the trauma itself. So it's not the thing that happens to us,
mhm.
it's how we react or respond to the thing that's happening to us, or how we adapt to it. That's the trauma.
I
And the
see.
most common sign of trauma is a disconnection. So if you think about it, when you're a kid and you're going through trauma and you're having all of these emotions that are coming up, what happens if your parents are following common culture and they say, if you express emotions like anger, you're to be exiled. You're sent to your room, you're disconnected, and you are to regulate, in other words, suppress that emotion. And you cannot have a connection with us until you suppress your emotion. In other
Mm,
words, they're going to threaten you with the thing that's most important to you, the attachment.
mm, mhm,
So we learn at a very early age to suppress our emotions through various ways, and this is one of the biggest traumas is we disconnect from ourselves.
mm,
So my line of therapy, what I do is I try to identify these areas where we've adapted to trauma, and usually it's in the form of some sort of disconnection.
mm,
Disconnection to our emotions, disconnection to our boundaries, a disconnection to our expression, so on and so forth. And then I try to help people understand where this comes from, how it shows up in our lives today, and how can we start to cultivate some agency and responsibility for this pattern and choose something different. That's
mm.
it, the gist of what we do.
Ah, very cool. Um, are you talking about ego at all a little bit? Like we sometimes there's we like have to start to learn how to protect ourselves. If something happens, something small or big in the household or wherever it might be in school, something happens and then, whoa, that wasn't pleasant. Or, now I need to learn how to protect myself and kind of cover up and kind of create this way to survive. Is that kind of what you're referring to at all in that you
Yeah,
mentioned or?
we're in line right there. So when we go through pain, especially when we're younger and we don't have a lot of resources to navigate it, we develop defense mechanisms.
Mm,
A lot of the times, these adaptations, like suppressing our emotions, that's a defense mechanism.
mm,
Because if we continue to feel anger or fear or sadness, and it's in proximity to our parents, and we're being exiled or we're being told, well, if you're going to get angry or you're going to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. So
mm,
we get put in more threat by having the emotions. We develop a defense or a protection that says suppress this emotion. This
mm,
emotion is bad. Disconnect from it. So yes, and then we would call that later in life ego or personality.
mm,
All of these traits that we have that we identify with, all of them almost always can be traced back to an adaptation to trauma at some point in our lives.
mm. Got it. And maybe kind of going backwards a little bit, just so people, the audience, kind of get a sense of who you are and kind of how you got into this. I'm just curious, how did you? Some people, there's one critical moment where they had this awakening. Some people, it's just from the beginning of their life. But for you, what was? How did you get into the healing journey or spirituality or any of this? How'd that start for you?
Mhm. Well, when I was growing up, when I was younger, my parents they were never together.
Mm,
And I mean, my dad was 19, my mom was 21, and they
mm,
were different races, different cultures, ethnicities. So when they bounced me back and forth, because neither of them wanted me at that time, I internalized a lot of the pain myself. They didn't like each other at all. So
mm,
as I modeled after one of my parents, the other parent hated me for it.
mm,
And they also, in some level, hated themselves, of course, too, because they were handed all this trauma and pain throughout their lives. So as I mirrored that, I was, a reflection of all that pain, and they hated that pain, so they hated me.
mm,
So I carried around a tremendous amount of pain from very early in my life, and I internalized beliefs, core beliefs like I'm defective, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, I'm not deserving of safety or connection.
mm,
When I was about 10 years old, I had a near-death experience through negligence and abuse as well.
mm.
And that sparked something in me. You know, they kind of like in the Pink Floyd song "Comfortably Numb," if you know it,
Sure.
where when I was a child, I had a fever. I caught a glimpse, and then it was gone. He just caught this glimpse of something that was really important.
Hmm.
And that stuck with me. But for the next, 10, 13 years, my life was pure survival. So I couldn't
Mm,
really focus on what is the purpose of life? Why am I here? What is my purpose in this? It was all just figuring out how can I survive? How can I make it through the day?
right.
When I was about 22, 23, I had another near-death experience.
Oh, wow.
And that one triggered all the memories from the past one, along with lots of other things. And I said, that's enough. I can't do this anymore.
Mm,
It was going to go one of two ways. Well, it could have gone really three ways, I think. I
hmm,
could have ended up in prison, which was on the table,
hmm,
considering where I was at, in location and ethnicity and all that stuff. People of where I was from end up in prison very easily.
hmm,
I could have ended up dead or some combination of the two of them. And they were both on the table. So I
hmm,
said, no, I'm not going to follow this anymore. And I started trying to clean everything out of my life, all of my relationships, all the places that I went, all the people that I hung out with, everything.
mm,
And I started changing everything that I could. But when the input is only survival and my idea of connections and relationships is modeled after the relationship I had with my parents, so it looks like abuse,
mm,
you know. It was a series of getting rid of everything, building something new, and then doing it again over and
mm.
over and over again.
Ah,
I ended up going to university at some point to go and study clinical psychology, addiction psychology. I had gotten through my own self-interest, I had caught on to Jungian psychology, trying to
mm,
figure out this near-death experience.
hmm,
And so I had come into the symbolism, the archetypes, the mythology that goes through the ages. And that led me into university.
mm,
And then through all of that, I found some incredible teachers that were studying psychedelic therapy. And so I reviewed all the literature, everything I could get my hands on,
mm.
and started studying it on my own. And that's how I got to where I am today.
Wow. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I can relate to actually a lot of what you were saying. I too kind of felt that I needed to leave. For me, I needed to leave my hometown because I felt like bad things were going to happen unless I left and kind of started
Yeah.
my own journey. So I can really relate to you.
Where are you
Um,
from?
I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and then I
Hmm.
moved to Chicago for art school. And then that's when I had my spiritual awakening and things kind of shifted. But I know if I would have stayed, I would have probably ended up in jail or probably
Hmm.
wound up dying in some weird way or, hurting
Yeah.
somebody or so.
Funny,
Yes.
I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, so right
Oh,
around the corner from me there, and then I moved to Chicago as well.
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. How about that?
Interesting. Interesting parallels. Yeah. Um, that's so interesting. I want to kind of go back. Are you open to talking about your near-death experiences at
Of
all?
course, yeah.
Um, I think you said the first one was you're around 9, was that right?
Yeah, around 9, 10 years old.
9, 10, okay. Was that something that happened that you forgot, and then the later one, your early 20s, kind of made you remember it, or how'd that all unfold?
So I remembered what had happened,
Okay.
the events of it, but I didn't remember the actual experience and the things that
Oh,
had transpired there.
I see.
When I came out of it, um, all of the patterns that led me into that experience stayed in place. And there was a great deal of blame that was happening on why this
Mm,
near death experience had happened.
hmm
So a lot of it was my fault. Um, my dad was blaming my mom. My mom was blaming my dad, and they were both also blaming me for why this had happened.
mm,
I had really, really bad asthma growing up in Detroit and being
mm,
in a very stressful environment. It's induced by the stress.
mm,
And my mom was a chain smoker as well. And she had also invited lots of men into our lives that were very, very abusive.
mm,
So my body would respond to all this stress and it would just start to shut down.
mm.
And so I was having this really bad asthma attack. And my mom did not want my dad to know about it because they're going to use this as some sort of legal leverage to get more or less child support, more
Right.
custody, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, so she had left me alone and she had left me with a friend. And I remember the last thing that she said was, whatever happens, he doesn't call his dad. So there was just big conflict between the two. And I woke up in the hospital. I don't remember how long after, and I was hospitalized for a couple weeks.
Mm,
And while I was in the hospital, of course, they're given all these instructions. The smoking has to stop.
mm.
They were acutely aware of all the abuse that was happening in there, but, what resources does the hospital or the doctors have to really investigate this or change this?
Right.
So when I came out, it just went right back to where it was. In fact, it might have even gotten even worse because now it had come up to the light. So a
Mm,
lot of my memories of the actual experience got suppressed very quickly because I was right back into survival mode. So it was very easy to forget a lot about it. I remembered what happened, but I didn't
hmm.
remember the experience that I had when it was happening.
I see. Yeah. And that was the one at the earlier one you just
Yeah, that was the one I was when I was about 9 or 10 years old.
9 or 10. Okay. Um, can you share the one that was around 22 or your early 20s?
Sure. Yeah, so at this point, I was training martial arts. I was
Mm,
doing like jujitsu, Muay Thai. I was competing as well.
hmm.
I had all this really big emotion, go figure. And I had no idea what to do with it. It was all deeply suppressed.
Yeah.
So the ways that I was expressing it were through music. I was playing
Mm.
a lot of music. I was a drummer,
Oh, cool.
and I would play in like punk rock bands and like hardcore bands. So I play so hard and loud. It was all the raw emotion that I had just coming out.
Yeah.
And so then I started doing martial arts as well. Well, one of the things that happens in these gyms is infections go around, like
Yeah.
staph infections. So at one point, I had really bad eczema all over my body as well. That was
Mm,
another thing that happened with the asthma.
hmm.
And so I got a staph infection and I didn't have health insurance and I didn't have any resources, any money or anything like that to get medical attention.
Hmm.
And so I also just didn't know what to do. And the staph just spread through my whole body like
Oh no.
quickly because I had so many open sores.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I went to the doctor. I just went to the nearest doctor's office and said, I had just look at me and they could see the staph all over me. And I was like, I don't have any money. I don't have any insurance. What can you do? And they said, come back here right now. And they took care of me.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So they loaded me up with antibiotics, which took care of the staph for the most part, but it also annihilated my immune system.
Mm,
And so then a couple months later, I don't remember which one came first. I got another staph infection at the
mm,
gym again. And this one mutated like almost immediately into MRSA. And it was bad. And so I went to a doctor much sooner.
mm-hmm.
And the infection was, I mean, it was life-threatening. But that wasn't what really got me, was they gave me another round of antibiotics.
Uh,
And so my immune system was just annihilated. And then I got pneumonia. And I was on my deathbed in my room alone
mm,
for weeks and barely made it out of this. Um, I was just gasping for air. Again, no insurance, no money, no ability to do anything with this. And I was also drinking a lot at this time because that
mm.
was how I was
Uh,
soothing a lot of this pain.
Right.
And prescription painkillers were everywhere at that point. So I was also taking those. And you combine the pneumonia, the antibiotics, and the drinking and the painkillers. And
Mm,
that was the last time I was really ever drinking or doing anything like that.
right. Wow. Um, did you, I guess, how would you describe the spiritual component of that, or just the um, how that transformed, or just it was, did you, what was the experience of the near death, I guess? Just like, I know the physical end, did you notice anything happening or you reflected back on and went, whoa, that's kind of what was happening, not just on a physical level, but some of the other levels?
Oh, of course. Yeah, this is what really sparked my interest in understanding this aspect of the human experience is for weeks I was in this transient state of consciousness and an altered state of consciousness. Like I was having experiences, but it wasn't here in like being who I am.
Yeah.
And so I started having these repetitive lucid dreams or experiences where it was almost always at the exact same time every night.
Mm,
And these series of surgeries were being performed on me. So I would lay, like usually it was in like a setting like a cave.
mm,
It was dark and dank and slightly damp, and you could smell the moisture in the cave. And there would be like one of those procedure lights that were right above me, so I couldn't really see very well.
mm-hmm,
And there would be a series of, 4 or 5 figures standing around the bed, and they would be performing an
mm,
actual surgery. One of the common ones was every bone in my body would be broken. My entire body would be shattered and fragmented. And
mm,
every piece of me would be cleaned and accounted for and organized. And then it would be reassembled.
mm,
Some of the other ones were my chest would be wide open and
yeah.
all of the gunk and all of the pathways, which was, to the best that I understand it, was all the emotion and all the residual pain that was stored in my body. They were going in with these cleaners and just cleaning all of that out. And it was allowing me to feel again and for things to actually come through for me to connect with my body again.
Yeah.
And it was also allowing me to see things totally differently.
Mm,
So for like 2 weeks, this was just constant. And then after that experience, once I said, okay, that was really intense, terrifying, and jostling. And I stopped drinking. I stopped all the medications. I started really taking my health much more seriously.
mm-hmm,
The dreams continued. So I
mm.
kept having these dreams every single night
Oh,
at the
wow.
exact same time. And I mean, just like a series of synchronicities and things were happening. And I had a roommate at that time, and I wasn't talking to him about any of this because that's what we do when we're going through traumas. We don't talk to anybody about it.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, something fucky's going on. Excuse my language.
That's all right.
Um, something's going on here
Uh,
around, 3:30 in the morning. I'm starting to see owls outside. There's always weird noises and all that stuff. And I'm like, Okay, I was thinking I was just dreaming, but there was, so we started talking about it, and he started noticing around that exact same time, there was definitely something going on.
Mm-hmm.
And, we could write it off as, too paranoid, early
Oh,
20s people just having whatever. But I really think something was going on there.
yeah, yeah.
And, this is what sparked all of my curiosity. And then I found this was a pattern that people had gone through, this exact identical experience all throughout the ages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Throughout so many cultures, this was like an initiation style experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got super curious about it. And one of the experiences I had, I was involved with all these natives, all of these medicine people, and they were chanting and singing and they were helping me through. It was like a ceremony. And so I started talking to my grandmother on my dad's side.
Mm-hmm.
We rarely, I have like no connection with really anybody in my family.
Mm-hmm.
But I was getting ready to move to Chicago. And so I wanted to talk to her a little bit. And I was asking her about her ethnicity. Because I've asked her a few times and she says, Mijo, I'm American and you're American too. And I'm like, you're clearly not American. You barely speak English. Look at your skin, look at your hair. Where are you from?
Mm-hmm.
What is our ethnicity?
Sure.
And she would always say, I'm from Texas. I'm from Texas, from the valley, right by the border. And so I kept asking her, and I started going to church with her. That was the way to connect with her a little bit. And she
Mm-hmm.
starts telling me little stories. And she's telling me that we were native Mexicans. That's what our family was. And that her parents had to flee from ethnic persecution
Mm-hmm.
and they immigrated into the States illegally. So that explains the shame of the ethnicity and always saying I'm American. She doesn't want it to be well known because one, you get persecuted, two, there's legal consequences.
Sure.
And she also said that throughout all the generations, we've had a lineage of healers, and we come from our ancestors were native healers.
Mm.
And that through every generation, somebody, at least one person, has carried it. And this was the only time that I can remember her ever saying anything nice to me. She said, Mijo, you're the healer. You're going to carry it. And so that right there, I mean, I didn't think much of it at that time. I had to
Yeah.
really reflect on it and unpack it. But between those near-death experiences and the things that I was experiencing in that altered state of consciousness, and then, of course, what I was really learning through the mythology and the symbolism through, of course, Jungian psychology,
Mm-hmm.
this just really inspired me. And, it was almost like there was a path that had been laid out, and I just had to rise up and become the person who could walk it.
Right. Yeah, it seems like a real critical moment in that point of your life. It seems like a big healing that took place and like a big, almost like a wake up call and a big kind of turning point. Um,
Yeah, wasn't easy, that's for sure. Terrifying, and yes, it was. It was a jostling, a wake-up call.
yeah. Do you feel like those moments, whether it's personal or just in anybody's lives, where it's like, even though it's initially it can kind of seem like a very difficult and sometimes negative or bad experience, but it almost seems like those are needed in some way. Like it's almost like we're gonna head down that direction anyway, so that it
Mm,
we kind of spin in a different direction. There's
mm,
something like the blessing in disguise. If that's,
hmm.
do you feel that or?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when I was studying Jungian psychology, that led into Joseph Campbell,
Mm,
who was, a student of Carl Jung, and he talks a lot, again, carrying on the mythology and the symbolism throughout all of the cultures, and he talks a lot about the hero's journey.
mm,
And the hero's journey, the first stage of it is the answering of the call. And so all these things will continuously happen in your life repeatedly, and it's always an invitation to answer this call. Terence McKenna talked about the spiral of intensity. So you keep coming back around to this exact same pattern. And it doesn't stay horizontal where you just go around. It goes more and more intense, and you keep going into
mm,
a greater intensity of the same thing happening. And he says this is the direction of our reality is everything keeps getting more and more complicated or more and more intense. And that was what was happening for me
mm,
is these same patterns, these same opportunities to answer the call, so to speak, kept presenting themselves, and they were going to continue to get more intense until there was a breaking point. And it
mm,
might have been through my health. It might have been my life ending. It might have been ending in prison.
Mm.
Something was going to happen that was going to eventually say, something's got to change. And that's where I was.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. That seems like energy uh, always wants to move or flow, and it finds a way to break through in some weird ways, whether it's um, I don't know. Yeah, it's like a weird example might be a car accident or something. Something's going to happen that's going to break the energy so something can transform. And initially it can seem really terrible, but it can usually be that blessing in disguise. But it's also nice to have tools where you can maybe avoid some of those things and kind of have a easier transition going into your calling, or at least navigate and better understand some of the things that have happened in the past.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I want to talk about because I'm very psychedelics and healing and that type of therapy. I'm very new to it, so I'd like to ask some questions about that if that's all right.
hmm
The first one would just be microdosing. It's something that I've heard about, basic understanding, but can you just elaborate on microdosing?
Yeah, yeah. Let me back up one step first, and let's
Sure.
talk about what the psychedelic is or the psychedelic experience, and then we'll talk about how we can use it. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So the word psychedelic broken into two pieces, psyche and delic. Psyche, very common word, psychology.
Mm,
It's referring to all of the immaterial aspects of who we are. This is again something Carl Jung talks a lot about is the psyche. It's often referred to as synonymous with the soul,
mm,
this immaterial aspect of who we are, a deeper truth beyond the physical body. So we have all of our thoughts, our mind, our mental patterns, our perceptions. We have all of our emotions. These are all aspects that make up who we are.
mm,
And then you have delic, emerging or manifesting.
mm,
So what the psychedelic experience is one where you connect very deeply with yourself. And
mm,
this is what people across the board say when they have this experience is, I felt deeply connected, not just to who I am. I understood who I am, but I also was connected to the world around me. I was very connected to others around me.
mm,
Connection is the underlying theme in this experience. And they talk about this in the medical literature so much. They'll call it like neuroplasticity or neurogenesis,
mm,
where neurological connections in your brain are firing and connecting much stronger and faster. And areas that normally don't connect or talk to each other are connecting much easier.
mm,
So connection is the name here, the game that we're playing with the psychedelic experience. We can get to that in so many means. All throughout history, every single human culture that we can observe has held psychedelic experiences in some of the most highly respected regards. There
mm,
was always a place for it in the cultures. There were always groups of people who held this, and it might be like a pilgrimage or
mm,
something that every single person undergoes and seeks out and holds with great care and respect and intention. So you can get there through meditation, you can get there through sensory deprivation.
mm,
You might crawl into the most claustrophobic, sensory depriving cave that you can find and go in there and paint some of the most magnificent art that we can still find to this day.
mm,
Um, we can see examples of people doing things like sun dances where they'll push themselves to exhaustion and dehydration, and they have this incredible experience. You can go into nature, into isolation. You go onto the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, and you hear the voice of God.
mm.
There's so many ways to get there. I have to sneeze too.
Oh, go ahead. No worries.
It is allergy season
Ah.
in full swing out here in the Northwest.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so microdosing is
Hmm.
where you work with a psychedelic substance like psilocybin, for instance, magic mushrooms.
Hmm.
And what you do is you take a very small amount on a regimen. So you'll say you'll do it for 4 days on, 2 days off, or 5 days on, 2 days off. And you're going to do it for 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Now, it's very important that you don't just take it like a morning cup of coffee or a supplement or a vitamin.
Mm.
The amount that you're taking is sub-perceptual, so you don't notice it. You don't have the big psychedelic experience.
Hmm.
But what it's going to do is it's going to it'll help foster the ability to connect with very specific things that are going on inside of you. It's very good at helping that conditioned mind, that programmed lens that we look at the world through,
Hmm.
the programmed defense mechanisms that are there that we just see as just how we are. And then
Hmm.
our mind validates and justifies and rationalizes why we see it that way and why we're right for it.
Hmm.
It's very good at helping soften that and get that out of the way a little bit.
Hmm.
So what we want to do is we want to start to build a practice before you do any kind of microdosing
Hmm.
or any kind of psychedelic induced experience. We
Sure.
want to start to build a practice where you just sit and you try and sit still and you're going to focus intently on your internal experience.
Mm.
So there's very specific things that usually come up right away, and it's usually a physical feeling. It might be a memory, it might be a thought pattern that's just going on loop. We
Hmm.
want to notice right away what's coming up.
Mm.
And our goal is going to be we're going to sit here for 5 minutes,
Hmm.
if you can do that. Do it for a minute, 2 minutes, whatever is possible. When I first started doing this, 10 seconds was like I celebrated when I could do 10 seconds.
Right.
Everybody starts somewhere, right? But if you can do 5 minutes, great. And then do it 3 times a day, that's only 15 minutes out of the day. So, I mean, I spend way more time looking at silly videos on YouTube. So, we'll say we're going to make ourselves a priority and we're going
Hmm.
to try and connect deeply with our internal experience. So, by
Mm.
definition, just by doing this, we're inducing a psychedelic experience.
Mm.
Now, if you can start to build that practice and use that as a foundation, and you say, oh, I have this knot in my stomach, this constriction in my gut, and it's always there, or there's this weight or this tension in my heart. My heart is always throbbing, and
Hmm.
there's a heat, and it's tense, or there's a choking, dry sensation in my throat, or my jaw is always clenching, or my muscles are always tight.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go and pay very close attention to that. And we're not going to try and change it. We're not going to fix it. We're not going to get rid of it. We're just going to get very curious about it. And we're going to try and relate with it. And we're going to try and ask questions and get to know it a little bit. When you can build that foundation and then you start to add the microdose into that. So
Mm.
then you take your microdose and then you do that practice. Again, it helps get that conditioned mind out of the way a little bit, or you can at least see it a little clearer. It helps facilitate the connections a lot deeper into what you're experiencing. And with this neurogenesis, this creating these new patterns,
Hmm.
these new neural connections, you can create new patterns very quickly and easily. So if your default pattern is to avoid that feeling in your gut and to fight and struggle with it and try and get rid of it or to distract,
Mm.
so we use various addictions, whether that's to the internet or to food or to work or to relationships or to conflict or to substances.
Hmm.
Instead of distracting ourselves to get away from this feeling, we're going to turn right into it.
Mm.
So, this is a way that we can take those old patterns and slowly let those go, or perhaps very quickly let them go. Everybody's different.
Sure.
And we can choose, we can cultivate agency and responsibility to create something new.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that there's a you have some sort of foundation prior getting into the microdosing. I like that that's um you have that set up before him. Bless
Excuse
you.
me.
No,
Hmm.
no worries. Um, so then that makes sense. Then can you talk a little bit about kind of the fuller experience, like that guided psychedelic journey where it's probably the more extensive or intense kind of experience, I guess. What
Yeah.
that entails.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be intense.
Okay, got it.
See, that's a belief that I've definitely held in my life, and I notice a lot of people have that is
Mm.
when we have these healing experiences, whether it's through therapy or whatever it is that we're doing, it has to be intense.
Mm.
I used to firmly believe that. I
Yeah.
used to firmly believe that if it wasn't intense, it wasn't going to work.
Mm.
That's not true. That is, from my experience, from what I held, that was the lens that I was looking at life through from my childhood experiences.
Mm.
Everything was intense. And so for me to feel something, for me to engage with it, it had to be intense. That's not the
Mm.
case.
I see.
It can be gentle. It can be humorous. It can be joyful. And these are different lenses that we can look at the exact same experience through. So if we can set our intentions to try and go in this with joy, with humor, with gentleness, we can immediately start to change our relationships with ourselves. So that's the
Mm.
first thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that foundation that we were building for microdosing, same thing.
Mm.
That's exactly what we're going to do. So if the psychedelic experience is one where we're going to connect very deeply with ourselves, the attributes of this experience are very common and highly predictable. The personality of the psychedelic experience is one where things that are inside of you come
Mm-hmm.
to your awareness. So if we have a pattern of stuffing our emotions down,
Mm-hmm.
bottling them up, saying, I don't like those emotions, pushing them away, that's going to come up to our awareness.
Right.
So all those emotions that are stored up inside of us, they're going to come right up to the surface. And if our pattern is to distract to get away from it, you can't do that.
Uh,
You're going to sit with it for 4 hours. So so we need to take an inventory beforehand, and we need to figure out exactly what's going on in our internal state.
I see.
And we have to build a relationship with it beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can do that, if we can take an inventory and say, wow, I have all these emotions, or I have this pattern, I sacrifice myself. I always throw myself under the bus to please other people, to
Mm.
make other people happy. I make myself very agreeable, all in the sake of maintaining my relationships because that's how I get people to value or respect me.
Mm-hmm.
If we can start to identify these patterns beforehand and we can start to build a relationship with them, when we have that bigger psychedelic experience and these all start to come up, rather than it being some big, overwhelming, scary monster that's just going to overtake us and we're going to spend 4 or 5 hours just running away from it,
Right.
rather than running away from it, seeing it as a scary monster, it's a familiar friend. It's
Mm.
somebody who has been with us since the very beginning. It's somebody that has stepped up, that defense that we were talking about earlier, that protector. It's somebody who has tried to help us when we were going through pain and we didn't have the resources to go through it. So rather than it being a scary monster that's trying to harm us, it's actually a valued, respected friend that's been with us since the very beginning.
Right.
Granted, they're danger prone. They, things go wrong when they're in charge because these patterns usually develop when we're kids. So they're
Mm-hmm.
very childish. They have very childish mindsets. They see the world in a very childish way. So
Mm.
we don't want them driving the car that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is we're going to set an intention. We're going to say, okay, I've identified this pattern. I've identified this pain. It comes up every time something in the environment, even remotely, triggers or reminds me of this initial pain. And it's here to protect me. It's here to defend me. And I want to go in and comfort it.
Mm.
I want to go in and soothe it. I want to go in and connect and relate with it. I want to go in and build a relationship with this pattern, this adaptation, this emotion, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get so comfortable with it. And I want it to get so comfortable with me that it can relax and it can rest and
Mm.
it can trust that now I'm the adult here and it's the child and I'm going to take care of it. So when something happens in the environment that triggers this memory or this adaptation to come up, now instead of it becoming the defense and the protector, it can say, I'm going to rest, you go ahead and take care of that. And it can
Mm.
trust that I'm going to be the one to do it. So we use the psychedelic experience as a tool to go in and work with a very specific intention. In this case, it would be to comfort, soothe, process, and express the pain that we carry around and to create a new pattern in how we deal with it.
Mm. I like that. That makes sense. This sounds it's just different, but it's like you mentioned lucid dreaming
Mhm.
earlier, those experiences you were having and the near-death experiences. It sounds something similar to that. I've heard people that um, like teachers or people that are really involved in lucid dreaming where they talk about, when in the lucid dream, If there's something scary, start to embrace it instead of we're used to running away from it. Go to it, like hug it, give it love or something.
Precisely.
Yeah, so it sounds similar to that.
Very
So I like
that's
that.
that's where I took a lot of the inspiration from.
Ah, okay.
So I was studying lucid dreaming for years
Mm,
too, because again, this is very similar to the experiences that I had. So
yeah,
I wanted to figure out when I was younger, how can I get back to that near death experience that I had without having the near death,
sure,
right?
yeah.
How can I get back there and make it easier on myself? Because the experience that I had was so profound and transformative. I want to get back to that, and I want to make it easier on myself. So we start studying lucid dreaming, and it's the same thing. When you realize it's a dream and
Mm,
there's this character who's chasing you, why run away?
right.
That's the default pattern that we have is to run away from the scary thing, but it's just a dream.
Mm-hmm.
So why not turn around and face it and say, who are you? Why are you here? What do you want? What do you need right now? When
Mm.
you can do that, everything transforms. And this big scary monster that was chasing you around, I don't know, maybe it's a giant crab wearing tidy whities, right? That's and the more you run, the heavier your feet get, and you're in concrete or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you turn around and you ask some questions, and that giant crab suddenly turns into a childish version of yourself
Mm,
and just starts crying, and it's finally seen. And rather than, running away or fighting and exiling this thing, you can turn around and comfort this.
mm,
You can soothe it, you can be with it because it's you. You
right.
can transform your relationship with yourself. It's the exact same thing. You're absolutely right.
Mm. Yeah, it almost sounds like instead of keeping it at bay or separate or discarding, it's like a moment to transform it and like let it integrate or reintegrate instead of yeah,
Precisely.
yeah.
Exactly. These are all parts of who we are,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when I have an emotion or a memory or a behavior and I'm in conflict with it and I'm struggling with it, I'm trying to get rid of it, I'm exiling myself. And when I look back to, well, where did I learn that pattern? Well, I learned it from my parents when I was a kid.
Mm.
It's the
Yeah.
exact same pattern. How did it affect me when my parents did it? Well, it sucked. I hated it. It caused me so much pain,
Mm.
and I had to adapt to it in the only ways that were available to me. So, in other words, when I'm doing that exact same thing today, I'm continuing the same pattern that caused the pain to begin with.
Mm.
So if I want to transform my pain, if I want to heal it, I have to really look at my relationship with it. And again, rather than trying to cure myself or get rid of these things, I'm going to instead take that and integrate it into who I am because it's a part of me. And I'm
Mm.
going to make space for it to exist. Of course, it's not going to drive the car that we're in. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to have that kind of control over me. I'm the one who's going to do that, but I'm going to listen to where it wants to go, and I'm going to listen to all the needs that it has, and I'm going to get us there in more constructive ways.
Right. I love that. Um, so I've oddly enough, I've tried drugs in my past and stopped that, but I oddly enough never have tried psychedelics. So this is all very new to me, and I find it fascinating. Um, so I know everyone's, healing, whether in a session, their process is going to be different from the next person and the next person, so on. But I imagine there's probably some similarities, maybe experiences that they have, depending on whether it's mushrooms or whatever it might be, and their things that might pop up that they're experiencing or facing and how they get through it. Can you share some of those common things that whether it was for yourself or people that you've worked with and have seen or witnessed?
Very commonly, almost across the board, the things that are going to come up for people are these repressed emotions,
Hmm.
the patterns that we have and what we do with it, the ways that we view and interact with ourselves. So when I'm when I'm interacting with myself, when I'm relating with myself, what is the quality of my relationship? Is it welcoming? Is
Mm,
it encouraging? Is it supportive? Or is it very harsh, critical, judgmental,
mm,
evaluatory, punitive?
mm,
Very commonly, it's the latter. It-
mm,
we typically have very harsh relationships to ourselves.
mm,
These are the things that are going to come up for everybody, and they'll come up in symbolic ways, just like a dream.
mm,
So it might come up through the form of memories, or you might see yourself through somebody else's perspective.
Mm.
You might see how this pain that you carry is flowing through you to the next generation of your children. Or if you
Mm.
don't have kids, it might be flowing to your pets or your animals or your coworkers or your friends, whoever it is.
Mm.
You can see how this pattern inside of you is spreading to other people. And then very commonly, I won't say this happens every time, but
Mm.
this is common. It might not happen the first time you do it, but it comes around. It happened to me for sure, and it was one of the most transformative moments in my life,
Mm.
which is you can catch a glimpse of what it looks like outside of that pattern.
Mm.
So for the first time in my life, in one of these experiences, is I found out what it was like to be held by a loving mother, which is
Mm.
something that I have no memory of in my life. None. I can't remember either of my parents ever holding me and valuing and cherishing me, not once in my entire life.
Mm.
So if I want to comfort myself, this childish version of myself, what framework do I have to do that? I don't know how to do this.
Right.
I don't know how to care for myself. I don't know how to love myself. And so I got that through a psychedelic experience where I just felt just divine, unconditional love. And I
Mm.
was held and embraced and valued exactly as I was.
Mm.
All the pain that I had, all the emotions that I had, all of the trials and failures that I've had in my life, it didn't matter. I was unconditionally loved and I could rest and
Mm.
just relax into that moment, knowing that there was nothing I could do that would break that bond.
Mm.
Um, so that gives you an idea of what it would look like after you've healed this pain. So it
Mm.
gives you an incredible inspiration of and a point on the map of where you want to get to,
Right.
right? Or a destination, right? You can see it over the hills and say, that's where I want to get to.
Right.
Then it's up to us to come back in waking life and say, now I'm going to cultivate a practice every
Mm.
single day, a livelihood. I'm going to change the way I live my life to get to that point right there. I'm
Mm.
going to make that a priority. I'm going to try to get there every single day. So the psychedelic experience very commonly shows you what your pain is, shows
Mm.
you what your patterns are. It shows you the causes of this. It shows you that it is possible to exist outside of this by showing you an example of it. And then you got to come back and do it. So, I mean, in short, it is quite literally the four noble truths of the Buddha.
Mm.
Suffering is inevitable. Suffering is a part of our lives. There is a reason for the suffering. You can make choices in this suffering to choose to stop doing it.
Mm.
Well-being is possible. You can experience something completely outside of this, and here's the path. This is what you got to do. It's the
Mm.
exact same thing.
I like that that the potential for seeing what's on the other side, because I think that's the inspiration, like you said, to like, okay, like I that's what I want now. I how do I get there? What's the path that leads to that? Because while it is important to probably, okay, here's the pain I'm experiencing, and this is maybe why. If it was just that, it might be still kind of challenging. But having that other component of, oh, here's the light at the end of the tunnel potentially. Here's I think that's really inspiring to kind of go, okay, yeah, I want that. I'm going to do anything to get there. So
It's a win.
yeah.
And for somebody like me who's never wanted anything in their life, never had any sort of success in terms of feeling good, feeling joy, feeling safe,
Mm.
feeling loved and accepted and valued, never had that, not once in my life until this point.
Mm.
To get that for the first time changes everything. And that's the case for a lot of people who are deep in depression,
Mm.
deep in lots of PTSD, trauma, and they've adapted to it through various addictions, whether that's to, again, internet, sex, relationships, food, whatever it is that
Mm.
distracts us. And now all of a sudden, something clicked for the first time. It really gives us a sense of hope that, wow, something different, something outside of what I've known all this time is totally possible. And what else would I want to spend my life trying to accomplish or achieve, if not that?
Hmm. I agree. I've kind of this brings up some things I'm curious about is it seems like when someone's in this healing session and sounds like maybe they're having like visions or they're being shown certain things, whether it's the pain or the light at the end of the tunnel or whatever they're being shown or they're seeing. Um, what do you, I guess, from your perspective, or you're just out of curiosity, what do you think that is? Do you think that's a higher part of ourselves that's kind of guiding this in a weird way? Do you feel there's on a spiritual perspective, like there's something else out there that's also kind of helping kind of guide the what's happening to them? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so there's a very common phrase in physics, which is I heard Erwin Schrödinger say this, who's somebody a wonderful teacher that I've had. He says, I never met him personally, of course, because he died quite a
Hmm.
while ago. But yeah, I've studied a lot of his work and found him incredibly inspirational, learned a lot from him. He says the total number of minds in the universe is one.
Ah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the common theme out there in quantum physics or in religion, whatever you want to look at it is God is always at the bottom of the glass. You can't get away from it.
Mm,
And what frequently happens is when you interact with this concept of God, you usually see yourself,
mm, hmm.
right? So it's to see that you and I are exactly the same. We just have different experiences and different vantage points, but you and I are identical.
Right.
So you can really start to see yourself throughout everything that you look at over here. There's this other idea in physics, which is I won't get too far into the jargon, but when you look at like special relativity, gravity out
Hmm.
into the universe, when you go into the cosmic scale, is like Newtonian gravity holds up perfectly as you go out to the cosmic scheme. But when you go down to the smaller scheme, is it actually starts to break down once you start to get to the quantum and Planck levels.
Mm,
So I'm trying to remember if I read this in like Michio Kaku's book, Parallel Worlds.
mm,
This idea of string theory and multiple dimensions of reality overlapping on top of one another. So the idea there is that since the formulas of gravity break down at the small level, is that there's multiple dimensions of reality that overlap on top of our own. And
right.
our senses, our ability to perceive these dimensions is very limited. It's only to what we experience here.
Yeah.
This is highly consistent with all sorts of ancient and indigenous knowledge, which is that there are multiple dimensions of reality overlapping on top of our own.
Hmm.
So if that's the case, then there's certainly types of intelligence that is overlapping with our own that we are unable to perceive or interact with. For instance, this intelligence that is connecting you and me right now over hundreds or maybe even thousands of miles and
Hmm.
hours of time, the internet, I can't see or feel or perceive that, but I can have a tool, being this microphone, this computer, that allows me to connect with you,
Hmm.
that picks up this signal and then can translate it into our senses.
Hmm.
So, in other words, I think that this experience is something very similar. It's a tool that allows us to change the channel on the TV of what we're perceiving, our senses, our consciousness, so to speak. And I think that there are different dimensions of reality that we're tuning into, and there's different levels of intelligence. And of course, all of that is connected to us. It's
Hmm.
all a part of us, and it's all coming back to this exact same whole. So, yeah, like when I'm doing this healing work for myself, and like before this call, for instance, there's a
Hmm.
part of me that gets really scared every time because I don't know if you're going to attack me and I don't know if
Ah,
you're going to criticize me and you're going to try and get me in trouble for something.
sure,
That's
sure.
the childish part of me right there
Yeah.
that is always looking for the threats. And so when that comes up and I comfort that part of me before I come in here, that's like the kid version of me being comforted by his higher self.
Mm,
So, right, you see what I'm talking about here?
yeah.
I'm connecting with myself through time. And so when having an experience like that today, I'm connecting with, you might call it this higher part of myself as well.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, there's so many things that go on there, and it's all, hypothetical and theoretical, but it's really fun to think about and really, really incredible when you go in and have those experiences. And
Yeah.
you start to connect with that intelligence, like, wow, what am I interacting with here? Who is this? And then you see yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, this is all me.
Right, right. Yeah, that's amazing. Then you're like, wow, this is incredible. Oh, I'm incredible. And then it's, like, why am I beating myself up, throughout the day for something silly, like,
Precisely. Precisely.
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I love doing interviews and meeting people and talking with people, but like every time before I start these, the same thing. There's like the fear that boils up.
Yeah.
Um, and that's always interesting, the how fear. I don't know if I notice it a lot in my life. I don't know if you have or people you've worked with, but something that you're passionate about, you like really love, but then in some reason there's like fear attached to it. It's just like this weird thing. It's like, why would something that you like love so much have this fear attached to it? And it sounds like there's these things from childhood that happen that um, that's just why that occurs.
Yeah.
So,
What we do there is we get very curious about it. And one of the
right.
questions that you can ask is that the first time you felt it? And obviously that's a no. You say you feel it all the time. And so
Yeah.
then the question becomes that we want to answer is, when did I first start feeling this? Where in my life did this develop? Where did I learn this?
Right.
And it'll always go back to childhood and it'll always go back to some pain.
Good old childhood, right?
Yeah. And, it gives us a great opportunity to really engage with it and relate with it and to transform our relationship with it by figuring out where we learned it from.
Got it. Yeah. You mentioned the higher self, and I know there's people different ways to kind of view that and look at that and talk about it. In your personal experiences or people you've worked with in these type of sessions, like does anyone feel like they're, I know we talk about kind of all one. I get that for sure, but like talking to what would be perceived as like a spirit guide or someone that's on the other side, maybe in a different dimension, that's like, hey, here I am, like maybe something
Yeah.
that's always been there, and suddenly
Mhm.
the psychedelic experiences open them up to this. Oh wow, you got a friend on the other side that's like wanting to help you or say hi. Does that
Oh, yeah.
happen? Yeah.
Very, very commonly.
Hmm.
Each one of the psychedelics has their own personality that's associated with it.
Hmm.
Um, in fact, I don't know how well you can see it, but that orange painting that's behind me there,
Hmm.
that one is both of those that are there. You got the old man and you got the younger adolescent.
Yeah.
These are both visionary psychedelic paintings here, and the young boy there is called the time traveler.
Hmm.
And he's holding out the scepter that allows you to navigate these different dimensions of reality. So, in these experiences, of course, this is an artistic interpretation of it. This
Hmm.
is the teacher, this is the guide that's going to come with you and show you through all these different realms and guide you back to yourself and to all this pain that you carry and the innate wisdom that's inside us that knows how to heal
Hmm.
and knows how to be whole. So, yes, there's so many different guides. I was working with somebody recently, and I have an apple tree in my yard. And it has right now the apples are about this big.
Hmm.
And one of them, she was standing underneath it. One of it fell down to her right there, and she grabbed it. And that was like the scepter that this guy is holding behind me, is
Uh,
it came to her. And once she grabbed that and then went back into the experience, is that's what really allowed her to go into all these different realms. It
uh,
happens in some of the most playful, innocent, non-assuming types of ways, but it's very common.
uh, I love that. But I think that's a quality of like who and what we are, like spirit and energy and consciousness and awareness. Like I think it is very playful
Oh yeah.
and joyous. So,
It's a part
um,
of who we are.
yeah, yeah.
It's, we have various emotional circuits that are built into us, and they help us thrive and survive in this world to our optimal potential.
Mm,
For instance, like humans are immature, undeveloped, and dependent, the most immature, undeveloped, and dependent species that we can identify in this world
mm,
for the longest amount of time. It takes 3, 4 years for a human to learn how to run, to
mm,
where a horse learns how to run on their first day of life.
mm,
We have to be cared for by our parents, so the attachment is the most important thing. But 3 months into a baby crying and needing to be constantly cared for, what keeps the mother caring for that kid? Why doesn't she just throw the baby out the window and say, I'm done with this?
mm.
she's programmed. There's emotional circuits that are programming her to bond and connect and care for this child for a very long period of time.
Mm,
But when all of these traumas and stresses of life get activated and these emotional circuits get out of whack, one of them being the play emotional circuit, we can see it in humans, we see it in animals. Play is essential for healthy development.
mm,
But when all of these other emotional circuits get pushed into the survival mode, things like play get suppressed and we lose that.
mm,
And it is so essential, so incredibly important for us to, as we start to go through this healing and we're starting to recalibrate or regulate those emotional patterns, is some of them are, hyper vigilant and overextending and always activated, and some of them are totally suppressed. We want to start to bring those ones that are always hyper activated down back into regulation, and we need to bring the other ones that are suppressed back up. So we really have to find a place to have interactive, person to person, agenda free play in our lives, which is so difficult for so many people.
right. Yeah. Um, I know we're getting close on time, or how are you with, because I have one or two more questions. If you don't have
Ask
time,
away. Ask
okay,
away.
cool. So you mentioned different types of psychedelics.
Mhm.
Can you just maybe just briefly go over some of the different types and maybe how they're maybe different?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Um, I'll talk to my own experiences with these.
Okay,
Um, Everybody kind of has their own experiences with them, but for the
sure.
most part, I've heard other people say these too, and I completely agree with them. Yeah, there's this wonderful book by Jeremy Narby called The Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Serpent of Life, or something along those lines.
Hmm.
And he goes down to Peru and he's working with various psychedelics like ayahuasca and psilocybin. He talks about the personalities. And I found that the way that he articulates it is just spot on, beautiful, and eloquent. And it's probably better than anything that I could do,
Mm.
but I'll try my best. So that's just a reference if you ever wanted to see it or anybody else does.
Okay, perfect.
Um, so I find that mushrooms, which is probably the psychedelic that I have the strongest relationship built with,
Hmm.
they're like these cute little munchkins,
Mm.
right? Terence McKenna used to call them machine elves.
Oh
And
yeah.
all throughout history, there's this folklore, this mythology of elves and dwarves and, all these really wacky, goofy, um, very clever creatures that exist in the forests
Hmm.
that, of course, they were describing psychedelic experiences back then because they lay all the foundation framework for you to understand where they're having these interactions at.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're like these really small, cute elves that are incredibly powerful, super powerful, and they get this tremendous satisfaction out of doing something very clever. Right. So and they got to do it in a way that you can receive it. That's the
Mm.
most important thing because they can do the most incredible, profound, clever things, but if it just washes over your head and you don't even notice it, what's the point?
Right.
So it's about doing the healing work in a way that you're able to perceive what had happened to receive the message. And
Mm.
when that happens, there's like this clicking of like yeah, validation and like
Mm.
high importance. Like they get a tremendous it's just satisfaction is what I think they get out of it.
Yeah.
So I really find them to be hilarious. And once I really learned how to have the experience and to go into it,
Hmm.
I mean, I used to really struggle with this. I'll just say that.
Mm.
Psychedelic experiences were very, very challenging for me in the beginning
Mm.
because I had so much pain, and that was what was coming up, and I did not have the foundation to work with it. But
Mm.
once I learned how to go into it, these experiences are just incredible.
Mm.
Um, so that's the mushrooms. Like I said, I probably
Big
have the
fan.
str yeah, I'm a big fan. If you can build, you have to have the framework. You
Right.
have to have the foundation. Otherwise, it's going to be very stressful. If the mushrooms or the psychedelic is trying to bring something up for you
Hmm.
and you're resisting it and saying,
Mm.
"No, I don't want that," because that's the pattern that you have,
Yeah,
you're gonna have a really hard time.
I
So
see.
we've really got to build the ability to get curious about these and try and engage with it and relate with it and participate in it. And
Hmm.
if you can do that, and you can really go in at the right amounts, which is crucial.
Hmm.
Yeah, things are incredible there.
That's cool.
So I really enjoy the personality of the mushrooms. Ayahuasca, on the other hand, is completely different.
Mm.
And so I went down into Peru and went deep, like 4 hours into the jungle away from the nearest town,
Oh
where
wow.
we flew into Iquitos, which is this town, they call it the capital of the Amazon. You can't get to it by road, you have to go by boat or by plane. And so we flew in there, and then we took a bus for 45 minutes out of the town to a small port town on the river. And then we hopped on a boat, went for 4 hours up the river, and then got off and got on one of those petty cabs, like the little
Hmm.
dirt bikes that have the little cart in the back.
Yeah.
And they pulled us through. I mean, like legit, it is just a little clearing in the middle of the jungle. Like you could see all the animals right there and
Oh
all sorts of
gosh.
stuff happening. Yeah, and we went on that for 45 minutes to this really small retreat. So the oppressiveness of the jungle, the darkness, the cycles of life that are happening right there. If you're not familiar with that, that alone is enough to induce a state of panic in most people, which happened
Right.
to me for sure.
Mm.
And then you work with ayahuasca,
Mm.
which the history of ayahuasca is so incredible. How did these indigenous with pre-chemistry knowledge, like chemistry illiteracy,
Hmm.
and the millions of plants in the jungle know that you take this vine and you take the leaf from a different plant and you boil them together for 4 hours, and
Mm.
that when you combine the two, it gives you a psychedelic experience. See, the leaves of the plant contain DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which
Hmm.
is it's a chemical that's produced actually in our bodies. It's one synthesis away from tryptophan, which is regarded as the building block of life.
Mm.
So it's very easy to come across this. It's everywhere. But our bodies have an enzyme inhibitor, monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which allows us to consume DMT on a regular basis and not have the psychedelic effect.
Mm.
So it shuts it off. Our bodies deactivate it.
Right.
So when you boil the leaf, you can get the DMT out of it. And when you combine it with the ayahuasca vine, which has the monoamine oxidase inhibitor in it,
Ah.
it inhibits the enzyme.
Right.
So it allows you to consume the DMT. And the vine itself, ayahuasca translates to vine of the souls or vine of the dead.
Mm.
So it's been used for as far back as we can trace. And what's really interesting is that not only did these pre-literate chemists, so to speak, have knowledge of how to combine these two plants out of the millions of them in the jungle,
Mm.
they also had intensive knowledge of genetic structures and double helix long before Francis Crick discovers the double helix.
Hmm.
So they had lots of knowledge long before we did. Well, I won't say before we did, but before our modern science came
Sure.
across these. So there's a lot of knowledge with ayahuasca. It's often regarded as the mother, like the mother spirit, the
Hmm.
grandmother of the planet that we're in. So when you go and engage with ayahuasca, is there's usually a time beforehand for a week, 10 days, whatever it is, where you have to do a cleansing diet. You have to prepare yourself physically to really engage with the spirit of the earth, so to speak.
Hmm.
And when you engage with her, um, yeah, it's like working with the mother. I
Mm.
found that she could get pissed off pretty easily if you've been skimping on, the things that she's been trying to tell you to work with.
Uh,
But also that was where I got that feeling of being comforted and held for the first time in my life.
mm.
So she can just be this wonderful, compassionate, caring, loving mother, and you have to put in the framework to get there.
Mm.
So
Got it.
she's incredible. And there's so many plants that you engage with down there as well that you do diets with that are not
Hmm.
psychoactive, but also are very powerful and conscious in their own respects. And when you combine those two, when you're doing all these various diets on these plants, and then you start working with the ayahuasca, yeah, the experience is very incredible. But I highly encourage people, if you're listening to this, to can very strongly consider if you're going down there, how you're doing it and where you're going to do it. Because all of us going down there, myself included, even though I come from a lineage that is very similar to this, when we come down there with our American money and with our
Mm,
American culture and our American customs, is we invite lots of opportunity for corruption,
mm,
and we can really taint those cultures and disrupt them in lots of ways, which is absolutely happening right now. So
mm.
I don't want to sound like I'm encouraging everybody to go down there and do it,
I
but
see.
if you do it, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Try to be careful is my encouragement.
Got it. Good to know.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, Thank you. That was I love the description of each, and that was really helpful. Because I'm new to this, and I'm sure people that are listening, whether it's new to them or not, they got something out from that. So I really appreciate that. Um, it, so could you talk about how people connect with you? What do you offer? Is it just in person? Is it online? Is it a combination? Can you just talk about that?
yeah. Easiest way to find me is website, psychedelic-integration.net,
Hmm.
or social media if you want to follow what we're doing. We have a newsletter on our website too, so you can sign up and follow anything that's coming up for us. On the website, there's the ability to connect, so you can send us a message or you can schedule an appointment if you want to talk. We do free 30-minute consultations, and that gets into what do we do?
Mm,
So I do therapy with people. I help you reconnect with yourself. My goal is to induce that psychedelic experience through conversation
mm,
and to help people build the practice, the foundation that they need to have this experience. So I help people prepare, and I help people integrate afterwards.
mm,
And I can keep people safe and help them out through the experience as well, if you
mhm.
want. Um, but there's lots of nuances that are involved with that.
Got it.
So everything's on the website and how it works. And so, in terms of working with people, I'd say the vast majority of the people that I work with come from out of state.
Mm,
And the way it works is we do a lot of the preparations over the phone, and we do a lot of the therapy virtually like this. A lot of the times people don't even come in to work with me in person. We can get to these exact states
mm,
through this conversation. And if you want to do something like microdosing, for instance, we can do the preparation, the framework of building that practice over the phone.
mm.
Of course, I'm showing you the door. You're the one who's got to walk through it.
Sure.
Um, and it's very different if you come out and you do this in person because when you're in the experience, to be able to identify what's happening, to be able to identify those patterns, it's kind of like looking at a puzzle when you're putting like a 10,000 piece puzzle together, but you're
Hmm.
only 2 inches above it. You
Right.
can't see the whole thing. You can't see all the pieces. You
Yeah.
really got to have somebody there to help you through it.
Got it.
So that's what we do. You can do it in person. You can do some of it remote. Yeah, there's lots of capacity for that.
Nice. Are you something I've noticed in the past with therapy and spirituality and all of that, it seemed to be more women would gravitate towards it. Do you find that over time more men are opening up to these type of things? Because I remember for me personally, I went to a particular school to learn to meditate, and I was one of the only men there. This was back in my 20s. I'm 40 now, so I imagine things are shifting. But what has been in your experience, personally or professionally? Do you see more men opening up to doing this type of work?
Yeah, professionally, I'm right there with you. Almost every job that I had post-graduate or when I was in school, it was like 95% women. I was always only one of the only men that was there.
Yeah,
It's really interesting because our society's relationship with things like emotion and expression, women are allowed to have emotions. In fact, they're encouraged to in lots of ways. Don't get me wrong. Um, they're also suppressed in so many ways, women,
sure.
and they have to be agreeable and small and so on and so forth. So there's lots of suppression for women,
Mm-hmm.
but women, for the most part, because they care for children
Mm,
and they have to be in tune. They're programmed to be in tune with the needs of children. They're still in tune with their emotions in some ways, and their ability to ask for help is much stronger than that of us men.
mm,
Not saying that they've got it great or by any means. There's
sure.
so many things that they're working through and so much support that they need as well. And there's so much repression and suppression of women as well.
Yeah.
Um, but that's changing for men right now. In
Mm.
fact, a lot of these conversations that I'm having, I talk with a lot of women too. It's fairly equal, but there are a lot of men who are doing podcasts and shows like this,
Ah,
trying to put this awareness out there for other men.
yeah.
And um, I haven't looked at the stats to see. I probably should do that to see what's the demographic divide between men and women. But it's again, it's probably divided right along the halfway mark.
Oh,
I
good. Okay.
I get so many men in their 30s, in their 60s who
Okay.
are saying, I gotta figure something out over here.
Right.
And when they come through and we start reconnecting with emotions and learning how to process them, recognize them, express them, and soothe them, I've heard a lot of men say this is life-changing stuff right here.
Nice. Yeah, that makes me happy to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always like to leave at the very end just a little bit of space if there's, and you don't have to use it if you don't want, but is there something that I missed that's important, or do you have any kind of final message you'd like to share to the audience? Could be
hmm
anything.
Yeah, yeah. I think the important thing here is a lot of the times we look at healing as needing something from the outside world,
Mm,
right? We need a psychedelic, we need a doctor, we need a medication, so on and so forth. And I'm not saying that there can't be a useful place for all of those things. What I'm trying to say here is that the knowledge, the wisdom that knows how to heal, it's inside of each and every single one of us. The answer doesn't come from a doctor, from a therapist, or from a psychedelic, from that matter.
mm,
There's no magic pills. There's no quick and easy fix. All of that information that knows how to heal, the wisdom, the wholeness, it's inside of each and every one of us.
mm,
And while we may become disconnected from it, and while we can lose it, it can't be broken and
mm,
it cannot be destroyed. It's still inside of each and every one of us. And so the process is just reconnecting with it. And
mm,
so as a therapist, this is what I do, and this is what I always encourage people to look for as well, is to work with somebody who can help you find it inside yourself.
mm.
The answers are not out there in the world, they're inside of each and every one of us, and we all have the ability to reconnect with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. So I'm glad. Thank you for reminding us of all that. That's really important because it's easy to forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll make sure to leave your information, your description below, kind of in the description for the different platforms that this will be aired on. But I just really appreciate you taking your time, your energy, opening up and being vulnerable and sharing your experiences and your wisdom with myself and the audience that watches us. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, Andrew. Very happy to be here with you, and I'm very happy you're doing this as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for watching another episode. We'll see you next time. Take care.